welcome back. So this will be probably one of the most important chapters, and that is involving wood, our media to turn. Now I'm just going to dive right in, and don't worry, it won't be all on this whiteboard. So I just want to start out with basic parts of tree. So bear with me a minute. Okay, so this is my rudimentary drawing, but what I want to point out are the few key features and or parts, sorry, and that is the roots, the trunk, and I'm going to call this canopy or branches. Maybe misspell that. Okay, roots. We can incorporate roots into turnings and woodworking as well, but it's quite difficult, obviously, to get it out the ground. Depends on type of wood, and it can be either small or rotten, and there are a lot of difficulties around this. So there's no. So the easiest way is to obviously above the ground level up, so trunk and the branches. That's the most used part of the tree that we use in turning. If we cut down the tree like so, and it falls over, and what we see is a cross section of the tree. There is usually in the dead center or so a heart or a pit. So pit actually is one of the most important parts of the tree, because it's driving all the nutrients from the ground up all the way to the tree, to all the cells, and store it. Then we have usually hardwood like so, and let's say on walnut it's dark brown color, and then we have here sapwood. So sorry, this is hardwood. And usually on walnut, let's say, for example, sapwood is much lighter in color, almost like a gray whitish color, so that will be sapwood. And obviously bark on the outside. Now there are more, let's say, beneath the bark, and between the bark and the pit there are I believe two or three layers, but they are not so important to us, at least not at this stage. And another part which is quite useful to know is medullary rays, which can emanate usually from the pit, like so, and they are most visible, let's say, or most common on oak. I mean, all the species, most of them have it, but it's really pronounced on something like oak, and not sure about the other species. Maybe some like exotic wood or something like that. So these are the basic parts of the wood that you, as a beginner wood turner, should know. So pit, that's here, the center. Then we have the hardwood, which is usually darker in color, and then you have a sapwood right beneath the bark. And now sapwood, when I learned the trade, let's say on example of oak, if this is oak log, and we got, as I learned my trade in woodworking, if we get a plank, let's say from here, first thing was always to cut out the sapwood. because usually sapwood is much softer, depends on the type of species, but also holds a lot more moisture than the hardwood, and it's really prone to bugs, beetles, all sort of stuff like that. So we will always start to eliminate a sapwood. Now, as years go by, as with the cracks in wood and everything, epoxy came along, and you can either fill in an epoxy or leave a sapwood as a discoloration, which is fine. I do it as well in my work, but you have to be aware that, and I'll show you an example in a few minutes, what can happen, in the sapwood over time. So not so much on the finished product, but if the log, let's say, is sitting on the outside, this will be more prominent. So let me erase this, and or I can leave it like that. So I want to show you. Okay, so this is cross section of cherry. Now, hopefully you can see on the camera, and I have a walnut example as well. This is sap and hardwood line. So this is sapwood, we have the bark, and this is the hardwood. Before I move on, there are some terminology that we need to set in, and you need to know as a wood turner what are some, I'm just going to simplify this, and what are some general orientation in the wood, or cuts, let's say. So this is end grain, this will be side grain. So mostly everything on the bark side here is side grain, we call it side grain. So balls are here made. So this will be, let's say, the top, and we dig in from this side, or this side, doesn't matter. So this is end grain. So on the end grain, we can recognize the end grain by all of this stuff we mentioned on the whiteboard. So here's the pith. So hardwood, sapwood, and the bark here. Major letter rays are not here so visible. Not visible at all, so there varies from tree to tree. Here on the side grain piece of wood, so this is also cherry, and now obviously it's all of the chain marks and everything, but this usually you see straight lines like so. Or on a piece of pine like this. So this is side grain, this is end grain. So the tree was like this, and the bark would be on this side here. Okay. Now, while we're at end grain, side grain thing, if you look here closely, this is always fun for kids as well. You can count the rings and tell, especially if you have a cross section like this, you can start counting from the middle out, and you can set an age of a tree, specific tree. So each of these, on this piece of pine, each of this dark color strip represents the winter. You can guess that usually because like with most stuff in the winter, there's lack of nutrients, lack of growth in a tree, so it grows slower. And this whiter stuff in between two lines is, let's say, summer and springtime, so it's much bigger, the tree grew much faster, and that's what you see here. So you can see, let's say here, pith was somewhere around here. At the beginning of this tree's life, it started to grow quite quickly, and then at this point of time here, it's really dense. So that tells me that at some point the ground at this specific location was actually lack of nutrients, even in the winter time, sorry, in the summertime. But again here started to spread out again. So it's quite interesting. You can follow that and explore it, you know. Now, as I draw here this, where you can count the age of the tree, let's talk a little bit, just mention this, the type of cuts within the trunk itself. So this is what is the most precious cut. So if you run the chain saw like this, or a sawmill, and you cut the board like so out, like this, and you cut away the pit right away, and we'll talk why. You have here grain is coming vertically through board, and that's it won't move as much, this particular board, in this direction. In this direction it will move more, but it won't cup. It's really prone not to cup, versus, let's say, if we start the cut, if we make another cut here, this is quarter sawn, by the way. This will be more of a rift sawn. If we get, let's say, a spindle blank here, the grain is, and at this spindle blank, this square is at 45 degrees. This is also quite useful, as you get on all four sides, you get straight grain, which is something that maybe some customer wants, and versus on the quarter sawn, it's really tight grain and straight line on this side and this side here, but on this side and this side it's not. It's usually going to be like a cathedral pattern. So I did find sort of a offcut from this, so it's much more wider, spreader apart, and you can see where the grain comes in and sort of shifts and everything. So so this will be this part rift sawn, and this will be plain sawn, where almost the grain of the wood is almost parallel with two sides, and this will cup and bow much more. So usually you'll end up something like so. Yeah. Exaggerated, but in some cases it's not so exaggerated. So but for now you don't have to know these particular cuts unless you want some stability or you want some special grain. The important part is you have to identify the end grain and the side grain. So this will be side grain, end grain. So the true tree was like so, as this offcut is. So bark will be on these sides, and this will be a circle, and this is end grain. So this is quite important when you put it on the lathe. Now I have here a piece of walnut. Here you can see more prominent the hardwood, the sapwood, and what's left of the bark, or that's another layer, but not sure what it's called, and it's not so important. And the pit is here, it's offset quite a bit, and we have a crack here, here, and here, big one. So when I was talking about sapwood, how I learned to cut it off, this is mostly why. This was standing in the field for quite a while. The hardwood is intact, perfectly intact. It does have some discoloration and stuff like that. It's actually quite different pattern in this walnut. You saw me this roughing out this log a few videos back, but the sapwood is completely useless. It's like a sponge, and it's not safe to turn. So but I want to show you how would you, if you cut a bolt, it's called a bolt. So if you cut, so let's say a scenario like so, you have a friend who knocked the tree down, and he burned all of these branches and thinner trunk here, but he's left with let's say this trunk down here, and he gave it to you. So and you want to turn, let's say, bolts or spindle blanks for that matter. So you would cut, let's say your chain is, I don't know, a foot long, so that's 300 mil. So you would cut it like so. You will get, I don't know, 4 or 5, it doesn't matter, pieces. And now this is it. Oops. So this is, now it will be longer, obviously. So I got a lot of questions in emails especially, and on Instagram DMs about, it's usually like this question: how do you dry your stuff, and why did my cracked? And they usually send me a few pictures, and on 99% of them it's this little guy here. It's a pit. What's most common is people see a canopy of branches, and branches are usually smaller in diameter, and depends on, obviously, on the tree, but usually are smaller, and they are, like, let's say, convenient. I don't have any branches to show you, but they usually start to turn and incorporate everything, the pit as well. Now, why is that a problem? So they grab a branch and just stick it between the centers, turn something, and goblet or whatever, and it's everything fine. It's just cut down, there's no cracks in it, and the next day they usually find out that it's cracked in half, or quite severely on one side, and they wonder why. And that's the pit. Now, most cracks originate from the pit. As you can see here highlighted, these three, which there is another one here, usually in most cases originate from the pit out, and that's why you want to cut the pit out as soon as you can. If you fold the log, I would usually either make a cut in half if there are any splits. If there are splits, then I would calculate which is the best way to cut it. Now, how would I cut this particular scenario? So how would I cut this, and why? So I would, firstly, this is the biggest crack, so I would in this case, since these two are like so, what I would do is make a cut here, and here, and in this case we are pretending that the sapwood is healthy, not rotten away like this. Now what's possible here, you get a one blank, turning blank here, okay, and you have here, if it's a bigger tree, you have a quarter sawn, real premium stuff here, either for boxes or plates, platters, whatever you want. And now in this case, this can be either a live edge bowl, like so, or like so bowl. Obviously we would account for thickness of the chainsaw, but bear with me with this scenario, it's simpler. So this is the way I would cut. Now you can either go this way here, depends on what you like. Somebody likes live edge stuff, somebody likes natural or the straight edges, so it's personal preference. So I would not incorporate of the pit or this crack anywhere, so I would remove them as earlier as I can. So like I said, cut here, and you have all this material here to store dry, and I would cut here and store this. And if this is healthy, you can get another, let's say, pen blanks here and here, or you know, whatever. So deal around these cracks. Now obviously these cracks won't go all the way through in the same position, they can vary, so you have to obviously check the other side. So this is the upcut, so it's like this is weathered. Now as we are on subject of cracks and stuff like that, I want to show you some of the different types of cracks. I want to show you a common example what you can expect. The pit was here, I didn't cut it away. I have noticed now haven't cut enough away, so you can see how the cracks emanate from that pit outwards. See, they all sort of drive in or emanate out, whatever you want to look at it. And these cracks you can see on this side as well, a little less, but still the big one here. I could save something out of this. Obviously there's a pen blanks here or something here. On this side, maybe if I cut away like so, and this, yeah, it looks like this one goes. Other than this big one, these smaller ones go like an inch, 25 mil in. So if I cut away, I have a much more usable blank here. So that's one case of cracks which you can expect. The others, which is much more dangerous, is what I call the radial cracks. Now this is, I'm just going to cut away thin sections here, so it's much visible, much more visible. So I cut away the section. So this is end grain, this is apple, by the way, and this is radial crack. So the grain, so if I put it like so, you can imagine big circle, this is going like so, our grain around. And these cracks are most dangerous one, because not always is visible like this, and we can separate like this piece, let's say, see, just nice and clean. Now this is obviously thin piece, but you can see here there's even dust inside here where it emanates. So if this is much smaller, and it usually you can see it, but people often neglect it and put it on. Let's say they put a faceplate here and they mount it on the lathe and they start to turn it, and soon enough this whole outside chunk fly off, and it's not pleasant at that speed to have a ball that separates like that. Now what I can see here from this piece is that this crack, radial crack, is like so. So I'll be able to save and make, let's say, small dish here, small bowl, and something here, either a cross grain box or something like that. So the pit is removed. It was somewhere around here. It's well removed. There aren't any cracks other than this radial one, which was on the day I got the log. It was there, I saw it, just ignore it and put it away to in expectance and knowing that this will separate eventually, and I'll get two blanks out of one piece. So this is the crack or split that you really have to be aware. And now other cracks, I'm not sure if I'm going to able to show you, is what I call breathing cracks. Now this one won't breathe as I press it, but this one, you can see it here, it just breathes, and I would not turn these. This will eventually get into fire bin, and at the next winter I'll burn it. And you probably are like, don't burn it, put epoxy in it. Sure, you can save balls like this with epoxy, but for me it's not anymore like a useful solid wood ball. Not sure if most of you won't agree with me, and that's fine, but I don't like piece of plastic on something natural as a piece of wood like this. And if like, for instance, this is plum, it's beautiful grain once it's finished and everything, and now to have here, I don't know, black or any, doesn't matter what color of epoxy, it just doesn't look good. And you can see the crack here, and you will see this crack here. You can't close it, you can't fix it, you know. So this is another crack. So this radial crack and breathing cracks, which can you press and close and open, these I would not throw on the lathe at any time. So straight to fire bin. This one, this is piece of pear. This has a small knot here, and that knot has cracked. You can see here. This is perfect to turn. It's not going to explode away because there is a lot of solid wood around this knot here, and it's not like structural. You can fill it in this small piece, and it's like I said, it's surrounded with solid wood, versus here this will or can, even if you glue it in, the wood is much stronger than this stuff we use. It can start to split up if you're using for like food every day, wash it, and eventually it will just break off. Similar with this one as well, it can continue on and break off. Like I use common sense on things like this. For instance, this one, there aren't too many cracks at the rim here. Oops, no, there is smaller one here, but there are three big ones here and one here, smaller one. So I can just barely, so this I would not turn. It's just not worth the risk, especially since a lot of turners use, especially in the beginning, expanding like recess and expand the jaws. You can't do this here because you will just crack open this immediately, and even if you grab it like so, it's still a possibility that you will crack this and it will fly apart, especially on the lathe at high speeds, fly off, and you have like 1, 2, and you will be holding on this piece. So 2 pieces you have that can fly off like big shrapnel, and it's not pleasant to be hit with it. So just use common sense on these things. Assess the situation, look at these cracks. Now you saw me a video back where some of these Pear balls start to crack. I assessed that they are not structural. There was not even going all the way through some of them, and it was safe to turn. So you have to use your judgment for this. But I hope I give you some general directions for what to look out for and what to avoid. Okay, so with the grain against the grain. So I went on and drew this. So this is more related to woodworking side of business. So like furniture and everything, but in wood turning it's slightly more difficult maybe to see for some people how the grain is running, and or which way should I push my gouge, and so on, and I'll explain that more when we get to the spindle work and the center work, cross grain work. So it's much more easier to show you when the ball is mounted or ball blank is mounted on the lathe itself. But here on the board, what we call against the grain or with the grain is this board drew here. So let's say this is some nice wild grain and it goes uphill here, and I want to plane this top edge here with my hand plane, let's say. The proper way would be to go from this side here, because this grain is supported by this one and so on, versus here this is not supported by this one. Once you get this, stuff removed with the plane, it's small amount, but still you can get a small chip out. So that's against the grain with the grain. Same stuff here. If I take a carpenter chisel, let's say, and I want to put a chamfer here, the proper way would be to go from this down like so, because this grain is supported by this one and this one and this one and so on. I just can't from this side, because if I want to get, and I'll show you this in a few minutes, if I want to go like so, this part will actually start to split here and here and here. So I'll show you that in a minute. I wanted to buy a bundle of straws because they are bigger, but I actually forgot, to be honest, so this will work. This is how the tree is growing. This is, imagine this a bundle of straws, or the cells, and they all grow like this in the tree. So this is our tree. On microscopic level it's like this. And what happens if I put an axe to it? So we all at some point chop wood, some more, some less, but we chop it like so, right? So you don't chop it like so, and there is a why behind this. If I put my axe here, and I'll try not to split this, and just try to find a way through. Almost there. Okay, so you can see if I drive the axe here, it will start to split, and that's how we chop wood. Okay, we are separating the wood fibers on microscopic level, and we get a chop. Similar stuff can happen if you take a board, let's say like this. So this is like so, and you smack it like so. What happens is similar. Whoops. I can find my way through the fibers, okay, and I can split it. But if I want to, let's say, cut it to length like so, against the grain, so the grain is running like so, and I want to like chop it in half, it will take me a long time to chop it like so, because if you see here on this bundle, I can't separate the fibers. See? So that's the fundamentals of how to deal with wood. I'm going to show you this again because I was too low here and perhaps not in the shot all that well. So if I want to chop, let's say this for firewood or for starting a fire, like barbecue, so this is the proper way to do it. Okay, so I'm separating the fibers like so. See? I can do the same stuff. By the way, you don't do this on the lathe, but this is convenient height for me for filming, and I'm using this spine, so not much effort in it. I can do it, like I said, like so. I'm still separating the fibers, and the axe can go through. Okay, but if I want to chop it in half, like so, then you can't just, it's not an efficient cut, at least, to say the least. So okay, I will get eventually there, but this is tiny piece and it will break off when you break those fibers. But if it's this piece, or even worse, something like this, so just straight up and down, you can't go. You need to start to angle your axe like this, and like this, and like this, and like this, to start chopping away the wood. Now, that first diagram that I showed you, against the grain, with the grain. Same thing applies if you're sharpening your pencil. Most pencils are wood, and you don't sharpen it from the lead up. So this will happen. It will start to pull big chunks, like so. You always go from the top to the bottom. Okay, it's not most beautifully sharpened pencil, but it's for demo purposes. Obviously you can use a sharpener for this, but then I wouldn't have something to show you. So that's hopefully you get much better understanding in wood. What is it, how it reacts to different cuts, how to cut it, what are the cracks and some of the defects in it, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. So if any questions, please put them in the comments down below, and I'll try to answer them in a Q&A video. So see you in the next chapter.